What's up, creative community? How you guys doing? Welcome back. Once again, this is Lorenzo from the Coach MC studio, and this is the place where we'll help you guys, entertainers, performers, comedians, artists, actors, all the creative, communicative bunch out there. We help you to kind of stand out in the audition room every time you get called to action. This is the place where you get your tips, your inspiration, your mindset tools, everything that you need to get ready to step up your performance from. So welcome back to this very special show today because it's about the movie magic of the 80s and what we can learn from the 80s and why movies from the 80s still today have this incredible appeal, this charm, this magic and mysticism in a way also surrounding them all the time when you watch them. It's always a smile on your face when you get back to the 80s. And I think that's so important. And at the same time, I feel we have lost that in today's movies where everything seems so dry, so calculated, so severe, just pander to demographics. Of course, not all the times, but most of the times it feels like movies are engineered, designed, manufactured in the worst way of the term and not with love, with passion and craftsmanship. I want to talk today about this, I think, very important subject that kind of brings us back to rejuvenating culture, resurrect the true meaning of mythology, of great stories, of comic book tales, of graphic novel tales, of reproducing the core essence of great books and manuscripts and really bringing great performances back to life and inspiring people. Because, hey, that's what we're all here for, right? We want to get inspired. We want some escapism. We want to exit reality and go into a magical place, right? Enter a beautiful, different kind of world, right? Where everything seems different than what it is in my own world. And this is where I get the chance to reflect upon things from another standpoint and just immerse myself in something that is completely magical and beautiful. And I want to kind of capture you, hijack you guys, welcome back to this channel, to this program, and bring you back to the 80s. And let's talk about what was so magical about the 80s and why I think we can reuse some of those structures from the 80s and insert them in today's entertainment culture. Of course, adapting them to the modern taste, to contemporary subjects and topics, but maybe get something back from that passion, from that golden era, I think, of movie making. So welcome everybody into the chat. This is Julian. Hey, Lorenzo. Rosita Macaron's always there. Can't wait. We can wait as well. Annie Boo. Hello, Lorenzo. Great to see you live again. Of course, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to the Coach MC studio. If you haven't so far, guys, make sure to subscribe, of course, to get updated by activating the bell. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Lorenzo. Maxell08. Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. And also, follow my adventures on Twitter, where it's the Coach MC, on Instagram, where it's the Coach MC, and brand new on TikTok, where it's the Coach MC as well, with the TikTok acting tactics, right? Because every day it's a good day. Every hour is a good hour to get some fresh acting tips into your system, to spice up your delivery, to step up your artistic display, to kind of put a new ingredient into your behavior delivery, and to show really what kind of entertainer, what kind of performer, what kind of actor you really are. So let's dive into today's show. Let's talk about what was so magical about the 80s. And I think when you just close your eyes, and I'm gonna say a few movie titles to you guys, right? Just let's start this show with a little experiment, shall we? Right? No, let's do this for real. Let's close our eyes. I'm not gonna do it because I need to read. But you guys just imagine, just by listening to what I have to say, those movie titles that I'm gonna call out now in a couple of seconds, and what they generate inside of you. What happens? What are the thoughts, the images that will get triggered by just hearing those famous titles? And please let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of when I'm saying a certain title, right? What kind of image popped up? What kind of visions, what kind of flashes you had, and what you felt. And I want you to close your eyes while doing this, because there is something very intriguing and interesting about the movie magic era of the 80s. And I think we can kind of ledge back to that afterwards in the talk, because I think that's super, super important, and something that in today's movie making process is probably a bit missing in terms of in terms of spirit and magic. So let's do this right now, live and direct. Welcome, everybody. Just close your eyes and listen to this. Time Bandits, Conan the Barbarian, The Princess Bride, Willow, Masters of the Universe, Legend with Tom Cruise, Labyrinth, The Adventures of Baron Munchhausen, Dragonslayer, The Never-Ending Story, Excalibur, The Dark Crystal, Red Sonja, Rania the Robber's Daughter, Flash Gordon, E.T., Back to the Future, Gremlins. I could go on and on and on forever. The 80s were so special because just by, if you get these movies into your head and just remind yourself of how you felt when you were watching these legendary movies, that, yeah, granted, they didn't age well, all of them, like in the same manner, in terms of some of them, if you look at them, from today's perspective, and you rewatch them, probably you might think, all right, some of them might be a bit cheesy, or might not be totally contemporary, and in terms also of editing, sometimes the pace is kind of lacking. We are used to very fast cuts nowadays, but still, these movies, even Flash Gordon, just think about Flash Gordon. How great was that movie? How beautiful and adventurous and courageous, in a way, was that movie? Or, Excalibur, or Time Bandits, Cocoon. All these movies, they had something. They had a certain appeal, a certain grit, a certain magical aura, in a way. They all were, all the movies from the 80s, I think one of the greatest secrets from back then was that all movies kind of resembled a fairy tale, in a way. It resembled a fairy tale, from things happening kind of magically and spontaneously, and they were just popping up, and you had to deal with them, right? What's up? Hypnotic is in the chat as well, and Sarina Tasinato, ciao Lorenzo, anche a te, grazie mille per esserci ogni giorno, ogni volta che noi siamo live. But you know what I mean, guys, right? Just by listening to these titles, immediately you were kind of, back in there, in these pictures that were so great, so entertaining, where everything flowed in the right manner. All these pictures were, they are greatly paced. They have a nice rhythm. They have charm. And I just kind of, I just put down a few notes just to kind of, visualize why these movies were so good, and why they're still, watchable today, and why they still have that magic. And I want to go through a few points that I think are crucial to why it is like this, why it was such a golden era and such a magical kind of era back then in the 80s for us as an audience. We wish those times back, because it's when I look at movies nowadays, I feel like people have forgotten what, that it's called industrial light and magic, that Hollywood used to be all about magic and entertaining people with a spark, entertaining people with something that was slightly unusual and not always completely rational, that had something in it that was, kind of otherworldly sometimes, where things would just happen because they were meant to happen, and it had this fairy tale type of appeal to it. And so I want to go through a few things that I believe were fundamentally responsible for making movies in the 80s so magical and so inspiring and so beautiful and so charming in the end. So Serena says, grazie a te Lorenzo per tutti I tuoi video. Thank you so much, also for stopping by each time. What's up, everybody in the creative community out there? Hope you're feeling great tonight. It's gonna be, it's gonna be a magical night, because we're gonna talk about the movie magic, what we're here for, and basically what we are missing in today's movies and in today's entertainment industry. Not all the time, but most of the times we feel like they could have done more. They could have pushed the boundaries a little bit more. I feel like movie making today is a bit lazy, even though there are a lot of people involved and everybody's, I'm sure, doing his very best to kind of produce great content. I feel that in today's movies, it's a structure that works, and it kind of gets reproduced, but nobody thinks about like doing something with that structure for real. They're just, kind of checking out the boxes and checking in everything that's necessary to satisfy demographics and today's trends and agendas. And besides that, they're not willing to put in some more work and some more passion because of restrictions, because of the trends, but maybe because also, people have forgot what was so great about the 80s. And I'm here to remind them. And also, we're here to remind you every Saturday, since my man Hypnotic stopped by. Every Saturday, we're going to celebrate the Saturday Night Hypnosis, and we're going to talk with a bunch of creative, incredible YouTubers about entertainment industry today, about the movies and the franchise that get produced and developed, about certain trends, about comic books and mangas and everything that's beautiful and exciting and wonderfully entertaining and also crazy and wacky. Yeah, we're going to tackle it in the most entertaining way. So don't miss out on our next Hypnosis Roundtable Saturday night. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? Maxell, für dich schalte ich doch immer ein, Lorenzo, aber gerne. She's always tuning in if I'm here. Thanks, Coach. Your videos are magic. Thank you so much, Rosita Macaros. So, why were the movies of the 80s so magical? First of all, we have a few components, and I think the most important one is slightly overlooked. It's not something so obvious like some of you might assume. Like when you listen to these titles, The Princess Bride and Legend and Neverending Story and Flash Gordon and Batman also, and Stand By Me, all movies from the 80s, Dirty Dancing, all these movies, you think about music. That's why these movies remind you of something. When you close your eyes and you hear the titles, you imagine, you immediately get a picture, you get a sensation, you get goosebumps, you get catapulted back into the scenery. You see a vivid picture in front of your inner eye because of the great music that was always attached. And it was kind of unprecedented because Hollywood till the 80s wasn't really aware of the power of soundtracks. Of course, they produced great songs for their movies, for their films. And of course, great musical stars were also born, and they produced musicals back then, of course, before the 80s. But the way the soundtrack impacted the audience alongside the film, and the way the soundtrack was also fitting the narrative of the movie, and the way also the music was accenturizing and emphasizing and encouraging and reinforcing the storyline the way it happened in the 80s, that was unprecedented. Think about Dirty Dancing and Flashdance and even Beverly Hills Cop or even Top Gun. They had incredible scores. Stand By Me, right? They had incredible soundtracks, incredible scores, and you could immediately latch into the film and to the movie because you were reminded there was this umbilical cord that was built by the music. So I think one of the greatest reasons why movies from the 80s were so magical, it's because of the great soundtracks, about the music that transported you, that really made you feel something, and it was perfectly matching the mood, the ambience, and the pace of the film itself. It wasn't just picked randomly because that star or that star was more mostly famous, and that's why it kind of promised to make box office and make a lot of money. Of course, that was a reason too, but it was really kind of chosen with taste, smartly and effectively, because it was really representing the movie. The music that was kind of accompanying, that was bringing the movie forward, was instrumental in the 80s in a way that had never happened before like this in movie history in Hollywood. So the 80s kind of represented that more than any other age in movie making history. Hypnotic says the movies from the 80s were perfect. That's because the energy is unmatched. Genuinely, yes, absolutely. That type of energy, that type of vibration of resonance, it comes from the music that inspires you. And that's why when you close your eyes and you hear those movie titles, you're kind of thrown into the picture again. You kind of revisit that. Think about Indiana Jones. What kind of great music, what kind of great pacing the music gave to the flick. And so music to me was the number one reason why these movies were and are still so magical. Think about the Goonies, of course, Cyndi Lauper. Think about Batman, the soundtrack of Prince. Think about Purple Rain, talking about Prince. Think about Beverly Hills Cop. Everybody remembers that music. Everybody remembers that song, that riff, that melody, right? Everybody is immediately in the picture. The never-ending story. It's the same thing, right? It's you kind of have the sensation that filmmakers back then, they were choosing music alongside the film. They were building this up together and picking perfectly what was really accenturizing the whole picture. Another great reason why the 80s were so magical is because you see the 70s, the 60s and the 70s were the definite resurrection of Hollywood. Great filmmakers, hungry filmmakers. And by the way, don't miss out on my acting breakdown of The Offer, a Paramount series that was just released earlier this year about the development and the production and the filming of The Godfather back then in the 70s. It's a mini series of 10 episodes, incredible entertainment. I made an acting breakdown out of it because I think there's so much to learn from this great series. And there we have it. We have the 70s, and we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of The Godfather in this year. So the 70s were highly influential in terms of the new Hollywood, the new filmmakers that were coming out of Hollywood: Francis Ford Coppola, Peter Bogdanovich, Dennis Hopper, of course George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Marshall Lucas, Martin Scorsese. All the greats, you name it, they came from the 70s, and they highly influenced Hollywood. But it was a very violent breakout, right? It was, very violent movies about very dark subjects sometimes. And so the 80s, they pivoted into more family-friendly type of entertainment. It was still great to watch because it wasn't just family entertainment that was dumb. Quite the contrary, it was smartly written. All the movies of the 80s, in terms of plot, in terms of dialogue, in terms of story, in terms of a bit of irrationality and things that are unexpected, they were unparalleled, unmatched. And so they brought family entertainment that was enjoyable for the whole family, but still it was a great watch for each and every age. Serena Tasinato: a me sono piaciuti vari film del regista italiano Dario Argento. Of course, Dario Argento contributed in a great way with his Italian horror films and movies that were gory and dark, kind of unprecedented for Italy as well. That's true, absolutely. Shout out to Dario Argento, who influenced also Schumacher and Carpenter over there in the States. They admitted, and he had some success in the States as well. Ma dice che siano anche film esatto, Top Gun con Tom Cruise, fantastico. Yes, Top Gun was great. So we have Steven Spielberg as a producer who was responsible for bringing these crazy filmmakers from the 70s into the 80s, right? And also finding new filmmakers like Chris Columbus, Richard Donner, Rob Reiner, and others. And so Robert Zemeckis, right? All these people kind of, they gravitated to Steven Spielberg. And he was as good as he was as a director. He was brilliant and a genius as a producer. He produced milestones, landmark movies of the 80s that are still today like big hits and great to watch. So he had a great eye because he was coming from that crazy bunch of the 70s, and he had a great eye for the new and hungry directors of the 80s. And he pivoted with his movie making and with his cinema. He pivoted into a family-friendly environment, but still without losing traction and grittiness and beautiful appeal. And so he produced a streak of incredibly, successful movies, basically. The Gremlins, Roger Rabbit, Superman 2, Stand By Me, and many, many others, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones. And then, of course, he made E.T. and Always, beautiful movies. And they had all this narrative, which is the second reason why I believe these movies were so successful in the 80s and so magical. They always had this narrative, this blueprint of being fairy tales. At their core, all these movies that I just mentioned were fairy tales, right? Where there was a bad witch, or there was a bad obstacle, or was something very evil and slightly right, threatening, that was coming into the life of a very good person, of a great family, of a little kid. Kids were the stars back then. And so they, together with other people, they had to overcome the evilness, or the great obstacle. And so, going on this adventure, like in Stand By Me or E.T. and the Goonies, these kids and these people, they had to kind of, stand up for themselves, and eventually, with a little bit of luck, they would actually, proceed and gain victory. So it was a nice happy end that was always coming in, and you knew that it was happening, but it was based on this fairy tale type of blueprint. So the story really didn't feel real, but you were committed to watch it and kind of get indulged by it, because it was made with so much love and so much charm and so much craftsmanship, that you could see that the intention was for real. And so you were more than willing as an audience to kind of let yourself get sucked into this storyline, like, let's say, E.T., right, or the Goonies. Even though it was kind of crazy and irrational, still it was okay, because you could feel that there was like this magical fairy tale type of touch around it, right? There was some sort of charming humor surrounding these productions. And so you were kind of invited gently to join the quest. And that's why these movies were so great. They have this fairy tale type of plot dynamic, and this chain of events that kind of happens and falls into place quite rhythmically, with a lot of charm, a lot of fun, where music played a very important role. That made these movies so magical and so great to watch, and where you could really escape, because it wasn't contemporary, even though it was happening in the 80s, but it had something that felt otherworldly and detached. And so you could just enjoy them without getting involved too much, and really escape and really have this adventure alongside these people. Top Gun is a classic. Hypnotic says, of course, one of my favorite 80s movies of all time is the original Teen Wolf. Exactly, my man just nailed it right there. What an incredible flick. Again, we have this magical theme, right? And embedded in this kind of normal, realistic surrounding. That's true too. The experience is slowly dying for me. Yeah, yes. I mean, and going to the movies with your family and friends was a unique experience. Rosita, absolutely, you are right. And Hypnotic was replying to that. That's true too. I mean, this experience is slowly dying, because back then it was like, because it was so family friendly, because it was so magical, and the music was so involving, people were kind of, joining, and as a group, as a collective, a family, or with some friends after school, you would actually just go to the theater and just watch maybe even two movies in a row. Like, for me in the 80s, it was normal to watch two movies in a row. Sometimes I would just sneak out of one theater and just sneak into the next show that was just that just started 15 minutes prior to that, without paying the ticket, of course, and just watching the next movie. And I could do this like forever. I would spend my afternoons at the theater, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone, sometimes they would just join me, and it was like a happening to be there. It was a great experience, absolutely. And yes, I mean, social media, of course, ruined a few things, like my man Hypnotics just said. I mean, for sure, you get distracted. You don't have the time anymore. You feel like you are so entangled with so many tasks and chores during the day and things you have to respond, that you don't feel maybe the urge anymore, that you don't have like that breath to say, you know what, I would love to see a movie tonight. Like, let's dive into some magic, because everything nowadays through social media and through the smartphone is getting so close to you. You don't have that healthy distance anymore, and so you don't get the idea of detaching yourself a little bit, because everything is just happening in here and now, and everything is so important, because you get all these experiences at the same time. And the more follower you grow, which on one hand is, of course, a beautiful thing, whether that's on YouTube and Instagram. And I wish all the YouTubers and all the social media influencers out there a lot of fun and a lot of followers. But you have to understand, the more followers you grow, the more responsibility in a certain way you have for all these people, entertaining them and giving them infotainment like this here, kind of trying to educate them with good content, and try to do many things for them, and share your thoughts and share your content with them. But that, of course, kind of, cuts you off, like from all the things that you would, usually do as you are inclined to do, like going to the theaters. "Oh, I'm tired," or just going out. Maybe I just save the money for gear and equipment. So of course we change our behaviors according to our status and how we are presenting ourselves. And by doing so, we get more work to do, more responsibility, and maybe less time also to enjoy ourselves, or also less mental space, I would say, right? Sometimes it's not even the time, it's just that you're so fatigued, your brain is so worn out, that you might prefer just to stay home or just relax a little bit. And so this movie experience is slowly dying the way it was in the 80s, and probably also in the 90s, which is sad, which is really sad. I know a very good friend of mine. I know her since since I'm little. Basically, we went to school together, and she bought this old movie theater where she used to go all the time in the 80s. She bought it and kind of refurbished it, and now she created like some sort of of a community around it. People are just giving in some money and donating to keeping this movie theater, this very old movie theater, alive. And once every 2 Sundays or so, they kind of meet up and they watch movies together in the theater, and just having breakfast and a brunch at Sundays. It's a beautiful thing, and I think we should do more stuff like that, right? Maxell, it's really interesting. Thank you so much, Rosita. Do you think people are going to go back to the movies like before? Yes, I truly believe that. Like, you know why? Even though Hypnotic disagrees, I think we all feel that urge. We all feel that urge of getting entertained in that magical way, and going out is kind of a nice thing instead of always staying home. I think we have reached a certain saturation with all these streaming services, that platforms that we can enjoy at home, and the shows are getting weaker. The experience is getting less satisfying. We pay a lot of money, but in the end, how many shows do we really watch from home? How many shows do we enjoy? We talk so much about it. Next Saturday, we will talk about many TV shows with my man Hypnotic, and the Dragonslayer, and Wyatt, and Will of the Fans, and Faithful J, and Prime the Godfather 76, and my humble self at the Saturday Night Hypnosis. Don't miss out on that one. We're going to talk about all these movies. So it's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't miss out on that one. But I think we will go back to the movie theaters, just kind of coming back to this little conversation here, because we need that experience again. At a certain point, we were so saturated, and it's too homogenized, absolutely. And it's bringing back people to the movies. I think it will be the next big thing. Maybe we can talk about subscriptions, maybe the way movies are going to capture our attentions or our theaters. Maybe there's going to be a bit more of inclusiveness in terms of what we can do also, not just going there and consume, but maybe we work to keep the movie theater alive. Maybe we'll learn something. Maybe we will have some more open door type of events. Who knows, right? Maybe we get more involved. We produce movies and air them directly at the theater. But I think the culture of going back to the theater will actually, there will be a renaissance. Every 40 years, there's a cultural renaissance that at its core is always telling the same narrative. Think about that. We have the decade of 2000, where hip hop kind of sprang up everywhere, all over the globe. And by the way, I got a video about that. Make sure to check it out. It's the cultural revolution that happens every 40 years. And before hip hop, if you turn back, the wheels of time, you have the 60s. And if you think about hip hop in the 60s, even though it kind of looked completely drastically and dramatically different, at its core, it had the same message, right? Music, new culture, being a rebel, kind of unhooking yourself from the system, saying no to civilization, saying yes to culture, coming together as a group collective, making love, consuming illegal substances, which I highly recommend you not to do, right? I do not recommend you to do that. But that was just the narrative of the 60s and the hip hop culture. And if you turn back the wheels of time again from the 60s, again, 40 years, you have the 1920s, again, wild bars, wild parties, new music, Charleston music, jazz was coming up, just dressing up and saying no to civilization, saying yes to culture, a new way of drawing, the Brücke, the expressionism, Blaue Reiter, right? A lot of new artists coming up, Bauhaus, new architectural styles. And again and again, again, every 40 years, we have a cultural revolution that its core is always the same narrative. So in a couple of years, we're going to have that movie going back to the movie theater cultural revolution, I'm pretty sure. I think live music is living the same thing, right? Lack of people going to the concert except for big stars. It's true. I just recently went to the Sophie Tucker. It's a bit off topic here, but it kind of plays into the overall theme. We are missing magic, right? So I guess, like, responding to the comments, and kind of deviates a little bit, but it gives us a bit more facets about what we're actually talking here. And yes, I kind of recently went to a concert. I danced with my wife. We danced 2 hours. I felt like an old man afterwards, back pain and whatnot, but it was great. Sweating was great. Jumping was great. Experiencing the vibe again, like beats, music, singing along with a band. Great, great feeling. Absolutely. And we're gonna have that back. Third reason why I believe movie magic in the 80s was unprecedented and absolutely great, and had something otherworldly kind of to it. It was the combination, like I said, of great music. It was a combination of, you had something like a fairy tale going on. Even, like, think about Dirty Dancing again, right? It's a fairy tale. Think about Trading Places with the great Dan Aykroyd and the over great Eddie Murphy. It's the same thing. Think about Gremlins or Superman 2, all these movies, Top Gun, Flashdance, they had a fairy tale kind of blueprint. But besides that, the 80s, I think the third big reason why they were so successful is because for the first time, someone, or better, George Lucas, did something that was unprecedented in Hollywood movie making history, which was basically to end up the story like a big saga, a big movie, an epic installation of a very successful franchise, and ending that movie with a bummer, basically, not with a happy ending, where the forces of good were actually defeated, and where there was no victory for the light side, actually victory for the dark side. And you had a surprising revelation at the end, a plot twist. Something that we call plot twist nowadays is just possible because George Lucas thought about, why not, right? Kind of subverging and kind of completely distorting what was happening, and why not kind of giving a complete crazy ending to the story, something that nobody expects, in a good way, right? And that was unprecedented the way he did it in The Empire Strikes Back. Easily still one of the greatest movies of all times. I mean, I love that movie. It's an incredible flick, right? It's so on point. The rhythm is fantastic. The editing, Marshall Lucas, everything about this movie is absolutely spot on. Again, it's a fairy tale. Again, it features great music. Again, it features a magical type of theme, the Force, the Jedi's, and the perfect hero quest. And it ends with this surprising revelation. It kind of opened up back then. The Empire Strikes Back opened up a very broad horizon of new possibilities in terms of creativity, of how a movie could end, how the good force kind of has to fight even more for obtaining victory, for coming out on top. And so it was something that kind of changed movie making in a way, and also brought definitely science fiction into the upper class of movie making. Science fiction was regarded as something very important, yes, but it was more a serious format. And then, of course, 77, Star Wars came out, but it really was consecrated by the 1980s smash hit, The Empire Strikes Back. Easily one of the greatest movies of all time, still. I mean, it's just incredible, right? On all terms, on all levels. And with George Lucas, there was this new fashion of making movie, where, of course, you couldn't really insert digital effects back then, because it was simply, hey, dragonslayer, what's up, welcome to the show tonight, I'm here, boys, I'm ready to listen, very cool that you joined the fight, vive la résistance. Dragonslayer, one of our panel members on the Saturday Night Hypnosis, and I'm really pumped that he's also joining the quest tonight. So in the 80s, what was also, the third part of this very important decade was that George Lucas opened up the way to practical effects that was unprecedented as well, because there was no digital effect going on. I mean, everything that I'm just switching light on really quick, guys. So this is live. Yes, it happens right now. And there will be light. And the effects back then, they weren't digital, they were handmade, they were just crafted. It was stop motion, it was, practical effects, and everything was, was built, miniature effects, and they're still today. Think about Willow, or think about Roger Rabbit, or think about The Search of Sherlock Holmes. All these movies, they featured incredible effects for that time, that were made digitally, and they're still nice to watch today. Of course, they haven't aged all that well, but still they're great to watch. They're very charming to watch. The stop motion in Star Wars is still great to watch. And when it wasn't about digital effects, and you had only like The Dark Crystal, for example, The Never-Ending Story, or In the Search of the Golden Child, what another great movie of the 80s that was. All these effects, they had something that made them look real, even though they were, of course, not as well executed as they are today. Nowadays, exactly it's an effect, right? Because it's not reality, it's a movie, and it's very well made. And so you're judging how it is made instead of the impression that it gives to you. Does that make sense? Because in the 80s, of course, it wasn't that well made, but it was sufficient to emphasize the action in the plot. And so it was still very involving and very impactful, and was very satisfying to watch. I mean, let's get it. It was a film. So everybody knew it's not real, but at least in the 80s, tricks had charm. I'm not saying that I'm not enjoying Marvel movies, right? The franchise that was created by Marvel, not the new Marvel. But the old Marvel was, of course, very enjoyable. Digital effects, very well made. Everything you want, okay, of course. And it's a lot of craftsmanship to build these effects, to kind of create that, of course. But still, it was sometimes so flawless that you were just, thinking about the effect itself instead of what it really gave to you in terms of impact to the story. Right? Thank you so much. Hypnotic says it makes sense. Well, when he said it, then it makes sense. Dark Crystal was great. They even tried to emulate in Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Dark Crystal and I mean, all the puppets back then, created by hand, made with passion. They had charm. They had something. Gremlins, they had charm. They had a wit to it. They weren't perfect or flawless. You could see sometimes, of course, that they were just raw puppets, but still the painting, the airbrush, the applications, the plastering and all that, the props that they handled. You were so fascinated about the craftsmanship and the mastery behind these puppeteers. The Never-Ending Story, also a very nicely moved puppet in the end, and also in the beginning of the story. You were so fascinated about how nicely they were interacting with the actors and how great and real they looked, that it was in a way more authentic, and it had more grit, and it had more grain, and it had more charm than in today's movies. Sometimes the effects are just so overwhelmingly well made. It's like a hip-hop beat production. If you think about the beats from the 90s and the 80s, when we're talking about hip-hop, they were so raw, they were analog, they were not digital, they weren't oversaturated with effects and layers and more effects and more pitches and more tweaks and instruments and whatnot, right? The technology was less, so the beat was more raw, more to the core, more to the bone. It was moving you way more, right? Think about, Michael Jackson and his beats from the 70s and the 80s. I mean, there is nothing more rhythmical, nothing more engaging than a Michael Jackson beat. And the beats from the 90s and the 80s in hip hop, I feel pretty much the same. Nowadays, you have so many possibilities that literally these possibilities, instead of broadening and giving more reason to your horizon, it kind of narrows them down, because the more possibilities you have, the less choice you actually activate. I feel it's kind of a paradox. It works the other way around. If you have less possibilities, you try to explore those few possibilities way more than what we can do with, millions of possibilities, where we can only, I feel like, sometimes at most, like, kind of tap in, and then okay, I can use maybe something out of that to kind of prop up an effect or to create something amazing in my film, but it's still not completely, the potential is not fully used. And till the time I get to practice that type of new technology to the point where I can fully kind of extract the potential out of it, a new technology has come into the market. And so I don't even have the time to explore these single effects, these single possibilities anymore. And that means that you have less passion in terms of detail and research and saturation of things that make the pictures more vivid. So my claim here is that through George Lucas and through the technology and what he did to the effects and to the possibilities back then, but not only him, of course, this prop making special effect that was actually a practical effect in the 80s back then was way more realistic and way nicer to watch in a way than in today's movie making process, where everything is so edited so fast that you don't get even to see what they've produced. They spend a lot of money, but the stuff you can't even barely recognize it. All the effects, there are so many layers, it's so fast that you don't get even to enjoy it. So that's my kind of take on it. And Hypnotic says, I think Michael J. Fox movies had some of the best music of the 80s, and all of them. I totally agree, right? What's his name? The Power of Love, Yui, and let's see, let's look this up. The Power of Love. No, that's Huey Lewis. Huey Lewis, The Power of Love. Great song, great score. Back to the Future. Again, it's movie magic in a way. Fourth reason movies from the 80s were so great, it's because kids were stars. Kids as stars. Kids as full-fledged stars. Acting basically better than the adults, right? Than the pros. I mean, think about E.T., think about Goonies, Time Bandits, Hocus Pocus. Kids were brilliant actors back then. Way more on point than today. And that's also because of social media, for sure. That's also because of too much technology, too many screens, too many distractions. Kids back then, they had less where they could put their their energy onto and their focus onto. And I remember it because I grew up in the 80s. And so it was way more about, occupying your time for yourself, drawing, Lego, building stuff. You had way more energy put into imagination and fantasy and less in consuming and just playing like today. And so in the 80s, kids were really on point. They were really focused. They had something very strong about the demeanor, the way they were acting. And I mean, Steven Spielberg kind of introduced kids as stars to Hollywood. I mean, of course, Hollywood was already having some kid stars in the 40s and the 50s. But now kids were really actors. They were really playing. Think about Stand By Me, right? Think about many Stephen King movies, Pet Sematary, The Shining. I mean, movies from the 80s, right? They had a lot of kids in there. And these kids, Billy Boyd, I mean, come on. It's just incredible. I think The Empire of the Sun is also a movie from the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. Empire of the Sun. I'm sorry to look it up. It's just live. It's coming into my mind right now. Empire of the Sun. It kind of plays into what we're saying. Empire of the Sun. Yes, it's 1987, and it featured Christian Bale as a 12 years old, and Christian Bale is acting better than anyone else in that flick. And I'm really sorry because there were some great colleagues involved, right? Some great actors in that movie, but Christian Bale, I think it was his big screen debut, I think back then, 1987 with Empire of the Sun. Amazing film, amazing actor. And the kids back then, they were on point. They were on fire. They were playing incredibly well. So it was also like giving these kids the responsibility of not fulfilling just a mission or playing just a niche role. Like, think about the Goonies, how great all the kids were following their plot lines, how they all showed their evolution, their progress, how all the characters went through the hero's journey quite nicely, quite seemingly perfect. So well executed. E.T. I mean, think about E.T. Just kids, right? And it's still, I mean, I'm not saying that to diminish the power of kids usually, but here they were not just, kind of fulfilling and giving, but here they were really the actors, really the leads, really bringing the story forward, really believable. I think Joey is also from the 80s, another great movie with kids. And I could name so many more. They're just not coming into my mind right now. But I mean, those are, I guess, are enough, right? The fourth reason why the 80s were so magical, because the kids were so good. You could see that these actors were absolutely, I mean, think about Stand By Me, Ricky Moranis, Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, very young, I think Kiefer Sutherland it was, not a kid anymore, but these kids were great. They were playing top-notch stuff, really, really, transparent, authentic, very realistic type of play. Also, I'm forgetting his name right now, the co-star of Indiana Jones. Maybe somebody hit me up in the chat and knows exactly who I'm talking about. Another great kid, and think about the first Terminator. When you think about these movies, there is something again that kind of it excites you, because again they were practical, they were real, they were genuine, they were so realistic, even though they were far away from being perfect in terms of effects or setup or props or illusions, but still you could kind of oversee that detail. It wouldn't really disturb your experience as an audience member, because everything about the movie was so charming back then and so well made, and even the kids looked like they were really involved in the story, whatever they were doing, and not just kind of delivering a few lines. So it was just an overall great experience. Movies from the 80s, if you think about it, every year had huge hits, right? Huge hits. And we were starting, like I said, we were starting in the 70s, where everything was very adult, very excessive, very dark, very obsessive, very violent, very gory sometimes, right? So we were coming into the 80s, where we flipped that paradigm and kids became stars, where music was great and optimistic and glamorous and sensational, where all of a sudden we had fairy tale blueprints, and could tell movies with never seen before plot twists, and kind of different type of actors. Think about Tom Cruise and Eddie Murphy. Both of these actors, they were launched in the 80s, Top Gun and Beverly Hills Cop. How completely diverse these actors are from one another, and both went on to have incredible careers with totally, like, dramatically different movies. I feel like these movies, they're it's not possible to replicate those type of movies anymore. The bandwidth of the catalog of movies that was made in the 80s, it's unreproducible in nowadays cinema, and we need to get back to that. We need to get back to the magic. Fifth reason why the 80s were so great: we started exploring Stephen King and his madness. And that's kind of, again, it sounds maybe as a paradox, or kind of contrary to what we are, kind of preaching so far, but it's actually not. Because Stephen King, Stand By Me is a kid's movie, and it's basically written by Stephen King, as well as Pet Sematary or The Shining. And so Stephen King had a way of exploring horror, of course, also with kids, that was unprecedented. And so he brought horror in a commercial package to the 80s, and through great filmmakers like Rob Reiner, Stand By Me, and Stanley Kubrick with The Shining, his novels, his stories, they became appealable to a greater audience, to a more commercial audience. We have John Carpenter, we have Dario Argento, and we have all these other filmmakers that were already kind of entertaining people, but it was more in that type of region of horror and dark horror and fantasy thriller horror, stuff like that. But it wasn't really for a broad kind of audience. and Stephen King managed to write stories that would appeal to the world, basically. And so each and every year throughout the 80s, these Stephen King movies came out: Christine and Cujo and Maximum Overdrive and The Shining and Pet Cemetery and Stamp. I mean, you name it, right? Every year, he kind of was involved in the production of a movie, and that movie became a hit, went on to be like a straight shooter, which is also indicative, because if you look at today's picture making, you couldn't really tell if there's like one author attached to a decade nowadays, right? It's really, there is no major writing or authorial influence on the movie making process in a way that I feel like, oh yes, I mean the 80s were, they were very Stephen King driven. And if you're remembering, yeah, sure, there was this type of Stephen King appeal to many movies back then. I mean, think about Stranger Things, the very successful series produced by Netflix. It is a Stephen King 80 Steven Spielberg type of, mixture, right? It's kind of that soup. I'm sorry, Rosita, I've kind of jumped over a couple of your comments. I'm talking and talking. I fell in love, Rosita Macaron's right. I fell in love with all the kids' protagonists, so many crushes. Yeah, I mean, they were cool. Karate Kid, now the absolutely it, Jaw, absolutely. Now the actors who play teenagers they seem like being adults. That's a very good point. Exactly. Yeah, I believe so too. That the writers are not free. That's an excellent comment as well. But yeah, they they seem to be real, like kids, right? They like, think about Hocus Pocus. They were doing adult stuff, but they were not playing adults. Does that make sense? They were doing important, things, and they were overcoming important obstacles, and they were creating their own reality. But as kids, like in the Goonies, they weren't acting out as if they are adults and grown-ups, right? Nowadays, I see kids acting and dressing and looking like adults. And that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, give kids their space, their development, their way of becoming adults, of growing up, of fitting in more mature boots, right? Give them the time to explore their plots, their tropes, their metaphors, and their elements. I mean, why is it that all of a sudden we need to be adult and grown-ups and very cool and very smart and dark and cynical right from the bat? Give them their space. And I feel like in the 80s, absolutely right, you kind of nailed it there with this comment. They had more space to develop great stories for kids and let them be kids in the movies, right? Without distorting them, or yeah, kind of changing their demeanor and their naturality and physicality just for the sake of it, just for being standoffish or snippish or whatever, right? Instead of just being magically curious about their world and just exploring the world and the, the things that were happening in the movies. Because I feel like all these kids, when you think about the 80s, all these kids, they were really just discovering what was going on. They were just wondering. It was like marvel for them, to them, right? What was happening, what was going on. And so that it was great to kind of, follow along with that. And so Stephen King is our fifth reason why the 80s were so magical. And the sixth reason is Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckenheimer. I think, they were very influential in terms of setting this action buddy movie type of appeal and creating movies like Top Gun, like Flashdance, like Beverly Hills Cop, that really influenced generations to come, that brought out these two incredible actors and definitely kind of made them stars and created, franchises around them, again, with music, with great stories, great twists. And one of them fell short, but otherwise Eddie and Tom took on to, be one of the, being amongst the greatest in Hollywood. Hi, Coach KBG. I'm sorry. What's up? It's great to have you in the chat room tonight as well. Not alongside the other crazy folks like on Saturday, but hey, it's more like a more intimate and private show over here. So if you have any questions, if launching in yourself in a comment, make sure to release all of your thoughts. Thank you for being on the show, and see you hopefully also next Saturday. So Stephen King was the horror aspect of the 80s, and Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckenheimer, they were the action kind of fairy tale type of aspect, and also creating strong males with purpose, with humor, with action, with that type of grittiness that was needed in the 80s. And again, they were very, very successful doing so. So the 80s were successful because, yes, we had themes that were influencing the movies throughout. We had music that was pushing the narrative and was helping to, to enhance the experience of, going to the movies and as a collective enjoying a great flick and kind of walking home with that music. The kids were helping us to kind of, putting ourselves into that situation with that healthy distance, because we would know, oh, if there are kids involved, nothing bad can happen to them. So we can enjoy the picture without being too preoccupied if the good side wins or not. George Lucas introduced us to great effects, to great storytelling processes and new plots. But Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckenheimer, they being the most normal amongst all these greats that I just mentioned, they contributed in a very, very instrumental way. They were absolutely, crucial to the development and to the success of the movies of the 80s, because they believed in stories that were slightly larger than life. They believed in oversketched characters. They believed in comedy. They believed in improv. They believed in letting stars create their own environment, their own habitat where they could feel comfortable to develop great stories, to develop great comedy, great scenes, and they supported heavily these stars on the way to the top. And so I feel like they are mostly overlooked when it comes down to the 80s, why the 80s were so magical. Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckenheimer, definitely they share a place up there on the pedestal, because they pushed this new way of movie making, body movies, so forward. It was great to watch the films that they produced. It's still great today, but Bad Boys started in the 80s, right? That's as much as I can say about it. And last but not least, we have great stars coming up, but we have also great directors coming up. We have people like Chris Columbus, we have people like Rob Reiner, we have people like John Hughes, we have people like John Landis, we have people like Richard Donner, Robert Zemeckis, great directors coming up, influencing and building up a new way of telling stories, and setting foot into the grounds of Hollywood, and branching out and rooting out and kind of collaborating all together. If you look at the credits that Steven Spielberg collected as a producer throughout the 80s, that shows how much work he dedicated to all these single filmmakers that eventually would pop up and would have incredible success. And he supported that collective. And so it was great actors like Harrison Ford and also Christopher Reeve, and of course the legendary Eddie Murphy. But it was also great directors who really believed in their product, who really believed in their actors, who had time to work, who were all about the craftsmanship, all about the timing, about great comedy, great humor. And so it was natural that that very supportive environment would actually grow on itself once it would reach its critical mass, right? If you fill up critical juice into a container and you pile it up and you kind of maxify that and you condense it and you compress it, eventually it will explode, it will burst, because you put in so much critical juice that it couldn't really withstand, the container couldn't really withstand the pressure from within. And this is exactly what happened in the 80s. There was a very healthy, supportive type of culture of bringing new directors forward. And that is the most important reason of them all. I mean, you can have music, costumes, great props, and great stories, but you need someone who assembles all this, who puts all this together, who believes in its actors, in the project, and the stories, and the community, and the culture. And coming back to what we can extract as actors, as entertainers, as performers, as some people who are collaborating with that type of culture, what can we learn from that? Well, exactly that. You need rhythm. You need great music. You need a great script. You need to believe in your actors. You need to kind of fortify a great culture where people can blossom up freely. You need to give space to improvisation, to fantasy, to imagination, to explore irrational boundaries, and to go a bit onto the edge of the box and try to look at storylines, at plots, at development from another angle, right? You need to kind of come up with different solutions, and having directors that truly believe in the product and the material, who really support this collective, who kind of builds up a great movie. But last and not least, it's when I say magic, what I really mean is love. And when I say love, I mean the passion of being in front of the camera has lost a little bit some of its love, some of its true meaning. Nowadays, I think because of this and all the other outlets and devices out there, standing in front of a camera, in front of a lens has become so normal, which is okay, which is fine. But we need to get back to what eye contact really means, to what, wowing the lens really means, to what Michael Caine always says, right? To kind of, kind of charm the lens and give the lens also something back. We kind of developed this skill of being great looking and and sharp looking and sincere looking, but at the same time we've lost a little bit of our spontaneous charm and a bit of an uncontrolled outburst of creativity and just a performance that is based on that, right? Just on trying to be happy and fulfilled in front of the camera, and not just executing and delivering and looking sharp and knowing exactly which angle suits me the best, right? Because movie making is not about which angle suits you the best, but how many angles can you give, how many facets can you show, how many interesting sides can you display? How many beautiful mosaic pieces can you add? How many ways do you have to transform yourself throughout the picture, right? And how many interesting ways do you have to say, hello, I love you, and goodbye, and see you next time, right? Nowadays, everything is kind of played out very perfectly, very nicely. It's set up kind of to satisfy our needs, but it's not really telling that magic. And to my clients, to my students, to my fans, to the creative community out there, to everybody who's kind of enjoying my services, to everybody who's watching me on TikTok, on Instagram, and who's watching the Saturday Night Hypnosis as well, I just want to say this: like, actors, create the magic. That's what we're here for. We're not here for just to cash in the check and execute the lines and deliver a performance. We're here to deliver, to cater magic. And magic comes through time, comes through development, comes through love, comes through practice, comes through craftsmanship. So if you're not sure about your expressions, your emotions, and your behavior, don't try to wing it on set. Practice and exercise it a million times before. Don't be lazy with your talent. Fully use your potential and really kind of transform that critical mass inside of yourself into something beautiful that is worth watching, worth perceiving, that gives inspiration to people. Because I feel that is the most important tool. That is the bonus tool on top of it, right? Because it was about inspiring people, not just telling stories to fulfill the agenda and pandering to demographics and having it set up that works internationally, can be marketed and shipped out to to the whole wide world. No, that comes later. First, be concerned about creating magic. Because once you've created that true spark, that incredible inspirational energy, that magic that lights up the eyes and in the face of each and every one of us, you don't have to worry about marketing, about demographics, about if it is politically correct or not. I mean, it will just work just fine. Just think about the magic and the inspiration and the love. The marketing will just work on itself. When the movie is great, it will be a success. Nonetheless, if you know exactly what it means to be in that movie or not, you just be there. You're a part of the movie because that's your contribution, the magic, the inspiration, the love. and just give yourself time to let that blossom up, through experience, through patience, through rehearsals, through exercises, through training, through all that. But when you're on set, don't feel rushed, right? I tell this to myself as well. Don't just execute. Give yourself a bit of time and a bit of space. Don't be so, forced, to kind of, have that time pressure. Yes, everything is on time. Time dictates everything, of course, and the pressure is always high, of course, but that just means that we're doing important things and beautiful things. That doesn't mean that you have to be the fastest on set. It just needs, to be yours. If that happens very quickly and swiftly, even better. But if you need time for that, take your time, breathe in, breathe out, and create that magic. That means ultimately that you listen to your intuition, that you listen to your guts, that even if the direction is slightly different, that you say, no, I'm insisting on this and I will fight for this because I know it's right, because I'm the one creating this magic. I'm not just executing anymore. And the magic needs to be sustained by your will, by your passion. And if you feel things in a different way, fight for them. Fight for the recreation of that feeling that influenced your behavior so heavily, because that is exactly what the audience needs to see. Remember, if you are the disruptor, if you are the rainmaker, if you're the one bringing new ingredients to the table, there will always be people who will, kind of act adverse to your offer initially. But then the haters will become holders. They will hold you so dearly. Once they criticize you, they will start loving you in the end. If you just have the patience and if you show them that it's all about the magic. So give yourself time to develop that magic and bring that magic forward in each and every shot that you got at your disposition. And enjoy movies from the 80s, right? Because there you can clearly see how it's been done. It's been done in a way that's just there to entertain and enchant people, right? And to give something that is beyond the lines, beyond the words, beyond the scene, beyond the effect. There's something that we all share. And that's fairy tale type of approach that we need to have sometimes, that we've lost a little bit in life. Coach is preaching, I get more invested in a movie when I see the actor playing the character. It's just invested. Yes. Just look at Viggo Mortensen when he played Aragorn. Absolutely. Dragonslayer commentaries. Absolutely. I mean, look at him. Look at every picture he did for the billboards, for the posters, for the booklets, for the leaflets, for the just even the pictures that sometimes could be annoying, right? After long hours on set. In each and every picture, you could tell this is Aragorn. He's seriously embodying this character. He's really believing in his craft, practicing all the time. What we talked about last Saturday, like practicing all the time with his sword and really treating that piece of prop, not just only like a piece of prop, like a real artifact, like a relic. KBG, yeah, great film by the name Secretary. The word it's honestly perfect to describe actors these days. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's facts. I mean, Peter Jackson, I think, is one of those directors where you feel like, oh, because he's also heavily influenced by the 80s. He did also a puppet movie, Meet the Feebles, which I highly recommend to watch. It's a great movie, completely incorrect and beautiful, just great humor. And you can tell that he's very devoted, right? He's committed 150% with all of its pores, right? He's sweating movie making out of his pores. And that's why he kind of gathered these people, and he made them believe in Middle Earth. He made them believe in Tolkien. He made them believe in their single characters, right? And just to slightly deviate from our today's topic, if you want, I mean, one of the reasons I'm doing this video, it's actually not that off topic. One of the reasons I was, so entitled and so invested in doing this live chat today, I'm gonna wrap this up very soon. I mean, we crossed the 1 hour mark, but I just want to say this. I just, I've rewatched Hocus Pocus Part 1, which was absolutely great. Then Cocoon Part 1, absolutely fantastic. And then I've watched Rings of Power, and nothing was happening, right? We talked about this at a Saturday Night Hypnosis, but again, it was abysmal. I mean, I felt like appalled about the difference of quality, of impact, right? Amazon, with all of its money, all of its budget, all of its possibilities and capabilities, right, wasn't even capable of reproducing 1% of the magic that we perceive in the movies from the 80s. That magic, right? That inspires you, that brings you, to this other place. Like, think about how many great opportunities were missed out with this series. And that's why I felt like I have to do a live chat on Monday to kind of, vent myself a little bit, to kind of coming back to what's good for us, to us storytellers. Hypnotic says, like, nowadays the studios have more money and less creativity. I agree. Yeah, it's more bureaucratized. It's more like an administration type of process. And yeah, more money, less everything else. Yeah, more money, more problems, right? Because more money involved, it's more important, more things you have to satisfy, more boxes you have to check, more people you have to pander to, more people that you have to bow down to, more, more knees that you have to bend, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. And that makes the whole thing more like an administrational process, right? It's more bureaucracy than movie making and magic. I feel like in the 80s, you had way less people to make happy, way less capital to defend, and way less investors kind of, to bend the knees to. And the investors back then were probably also, like, take Steven Spielberg, like a bit more creative and not as administrative like they are today. Yeah, I mean, it's really like that. If you think about how sometimes more money, like, think about the Matrix, right? The first Matrix movie had like limited resources and limited time, to kind of to get done. And if you think about the other two movies where you had way more resources, way more time, way more money, and everything else, it's still like the two other movies, even though they were good, like compared to today's movies, they were great. But there were, I mean, the first movie was just unmatched, and there they had very much less compared to what they had afterwards. So sometimes our creativity gets forced into a tunnel of just using what's useful and discarding every other possibility by limited resources, by time restrictions, by many other factors. And that's why sometimes we are more creative when we have less, at our disposition. And I guess that's pretty much it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining today's show, Movie Magic of the 80s, and how to recreate that feeling that we sometimes are lacking today. Not sometimes, most of the times. And why I feel it's so important is because it's inspiring. Because you close your eyes and you think about these movies, you think about the epic scores, you think about these kids that were playing so greatly, you think about the non-involvement of politics and agendas, and just the pure storytelling process, just crystalline storytelling, just coming forward with the plot and just telling great stories, creating effects by hand, by really, morphing them out and really recreating them, and having practical things built, right? And kind of apply your sweat, your passion onto things that are real and physically tangible. I think that helped as well. Great directors getting discovered and also supported by their respective producers, and not getting dropped by, the first kind of flop. And great actors that were also leading the tribe, new type of characters, new type of actors. We'll catch the playback on what I missed. Absolutely, make sure to check it out. Maxell, it was a very great stream. Thanks. Absolutely welcome. Thanks so much to everybody present in the stream today. Thanks so much to the creative community out there. Thanks so much to the movies of the 80s. And believe in your product, believe in your magic, and bring that magic forward no matter what, and fight for it, right? And so, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap this up for today. It's been a great live chat. If you want, you can hit me up on Instagram. Just DM me. Leave me some comments in the comment section down below. If you're here for the first time, make sure to subscribe and activate the bell. Also, activate, of course, our subscription mode. Once again, I'm on Twitter as the Coach MC, on TikTok with the TikTok acting tactics. And next Saturday, it's going to be the Saturday Night Hypnosis with my man Hypnotic, with my man Dragonslayer Commentaries, with my man Fatal J, Prime the Godfather 76, Wyatt Turner, and Will of the Fans, and myself as well. and where we're going to talk about great movies, great entertainment, and the magic of entertainment industry, and sometimes the creativity that can be so small and so important to a broader audience. Thanks so much for joining, guys. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, yes, that's what I wanted to say. Hit the like button, guys. If you liked, then leave a like. See you next time with the next video. I guess now you're ready to perform. And the coach is out. No, really.